Welcome to episode 15 of Radio Omnicor. I'm your host, Colleen McClintock, and as usual, you're listening to the show that is guaranteed to teach you something new and where you will meet an interesting and dynamic guest. We're talking about global connectivity, AI, automation, and new media, which are just some of the few drivers reshaping how we think about work and what constitutes work and the skills we will need to be productive in the future. So to help us with this, in studio today, we welcome Dr. Hilton Rudnick, Omnicor's MD, and Martin Pienaar. Martin is the COO of Mindworx. He's a qualified chartered accountant and is a member of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And on a more personal level, Martin's love of fitness has seen him complete the notoriously difficult Cape Epic cycle race. He's highly sociable, he loves to cook, he enjoys spending time with his family and getting on his boat over the weekends, and devouring many business books and biographies. He is also known for his community mindedness. So welcome, Martin. It's wonderful to have some time with you and chat more about these fascinating topics. Maybe you can just start off with telling us a little bit more about yourself, other than the intro.
Cool. So I started my career as a chartered accountant, but then I think my lack of attention to detail got the better of me. And really my passion was around technology, and not technology for technology's sake, but more the impact of technology on people's lives and how technology can make our workplaces better places to be and make us more productive and more efficient in what we do.
Because it is an interesting career where you end up, and you're so passionate about this topic. It is quite a career switch. So this is how it happens.
Yeah, and then joining Mindworx, more than a decade ago now, and sort of morphing from being a pure recruitment company into one that now trains unemployed graduates and prepares them for the world of work, and the very skills that we'll be talking about today that are required in the workplace, experimenting and trying new things to get those skills to young, bright graduates.
So I know that you just came back from your epic race. How did that go?
It went really well. I think, like anything in life, if you're well prepared for it, then you can handle like really tough days, because epic, there isn't a day where they don't throw curved balls at you. I think that's the ethos of the race. It really needs to be really tough. It's the sort of the pinnacle of mountain biking in the world. It attracts a field of more than half the field come from overseas. They've got a great brand around the world. So yeah, and it went really smoothly. No crashes and no major mechanicals.
So that's an amazing achievement. Incredible. In studio also today, Hilton Rudnick. Any comments from you? Kick-off comments?
Yeah, I think it's always a treat to be in these kind of sessions, and it's great to have Martin over here. And I think it would be useful, Martin, maybe just to hear about some of your experiences at Singularity. A lot of people kind of hear the word. I think you're probably one of the few people in the country who have actually attended the Ray Kurzweil University. And it would be great just to hear some of your thoughts around what happens there, how did you get to go there, that kind of thing.
It really was an eye-opener. So I went on the executive program in Silicon Valley at the end of 2016 and really got to understand in much more depth how exponential technologies are changing the lives. So the objective of Singularity University is to impact 1 billion lives on Earth over the next decade using or through the benefits of exponential technologies. So areas like energy, food, water, healthcare, just using technology and the impact of technology to better people's lives. So getting to understand that in much more detail, cyber crime. So for every positive use of technology, there's a negative use of technology, and there's invariably very bright minds corrupting the technology for nefarious means. So while the US authorities are using drone technology to prevent over-the-border transgressions, the Mexicans are flying cocaine into America using the very same drone technology. So we're coming up with great encryption and protection for our data that we store more and more in the cloud these days, and the Russians are finding ways of infiltrating that data and hacking into elections. And so I think one has to be just aware of the fact that every time technology creates opportunities and changes our lives for the better, somebody out there is using that technology for the inverse.
It's the nature of people, I guess it is, in the way that they function in the world. And is Singularity more than a think tank? Does it translate into tangible actions by governments, by people? How does it work in that way?
So there is a 3-month program where people actually come in with ideas and then workshop and experiment with those ideas with great minds all around them, and use the faculty to actually develop those ideas and actually start businesses and seed, take opportunities from ideas into reality. But I think what Singularity is doing is that they're spreading the word around the world. So everybody that's been to Singularity comes back and evangelizes what they've learned. And they're also starting to run programs around the world. I know that there are a couple of programs running in South Africa over the next 12 months, which will give a broader range of people access to that thinking. And anybody that's thinking in that way is going to start to adjust their businesses in that way. So it becomes self-fulfilling in that we all start to move down this path of taking advantage of these technologies that are overlaying each other, and I think seeing the benefits of them down the road, and starting to adjust for that.
Well, I think that's a good segue into the question I have, which speaks to sort of our size business and what do small businesses need to do to cope in this ever-changing world. What can we do to prepare?
I think small businesses will never have the firepower to be able to build all these technologies themselves. So, fortunately, the cost of starting businesses and running small businesses and the opportunity to use these technologies in small business is becoming prolific because software is being offered as services now.
Right.
So the old days where you had to get to a certain scale to be able to afford to buy a software package. So let's say it was you're running a bank and now you need to buy a SAP to run the bank for you. Those days are gone to some extent. You know, we can rent algorithms. You can use algorithms as a service and pay for that service. You can rent software. We use the Google Suite to run our business, so we have access to all the benefits of the security that they build around their mail and their calendar and their contacts and their Office suite. It's all in the cloud, and we just pay a fee per user per month. So we didn't have to go and buy a package. We just pay a service fee. So I think all of us as small businesses have access to much more technology than we would have been able to previously afford. And I think the trick now is to find out what's out there and make sure that we're doing the necessary research to access best of breed services that are being offered. Very few companies are going to be able to compete with the scale of a Google or a Microsoft or a Apple, Amazon when it comes to artificial intelligence. But all of those organizations are offering services in this space, in the cloud. So there's no reason why we couldn't, in our small businesses, add artificial intelligence, for example, add the tools to analyze big data.
So
without having to make a massive investment up front.
Right.
So the thinking kind of has to change. It's not out of our reach, but how you collaborate is becoming more important.
And then what kind of skills do you need in your organization to now assess these different technologies that are available, incorporate them into your organization, rather than somebody that previously maybe run a LAN or a server farm or put the firewalls in place around that stuff, because Google's handling that for us now, or Amazon's handling that for that. In fact, we did a systems migration recently where we moved from one general ledger system to another, and the chartered accountant who ran a small business that was doing that transition for us just had an Apple Mac computer, and all the grunt work, the actual transition work, was taking place on Amazon Cloud, on some server somewhere around the world. No one knows where that was. And yet he was doing a major systems migration for us. Now in the past he would have had to have a lot of computing power available in his business to do that, and yet now he just rented that power for the period of time that he was doing that migration for us.
So, I think our business in a way is a bit of, not a role model, but in a way maybe symbolic of the way businesses in the future are going to run, because we are very much in the talent management space, we work in the HR space, we're involved in assessments, we're involved in leadership development, but a third of our staff are software developers.
Yes.
So we're building technology for the industry to automate those components in that space that'll give them a lot more scalability and those kind of things. So I think a lot of small businesses will probably need to structure themselves in a way that we have.
But if you think about the fact that you've got lots of client data running through your systems, a lot of the skill that you require moving forward is if you want to use that data to aggregate it and to come up with a better view to be able to give back to customers about trends in the industry or different maybe traits that you're discovering as part of your assessment process, and comparing that across a broader base of information. It's going to be about the legal contracts that you sign with your clients, the confidentiality of the information that you're taking responsibility for on behalf of clients, how to safeguard that information, how to package it and sell it back to a client. So it's potentially you're going to have different skills inside your business to what you had.
Yeah, I think it's 100% true. I mean, one of the things we've noticed with our clients, and I think this probably happens in a lot of organizations, is that the demand increases as your technology gets sophisticated. So things that, if you've been giving them the same kind of information for a year or two, it starts getting stale.
Yes.
And they start looking for you to come in with new, fresh insights. And we feel under pressure the whole time to keep our technology and it's not so much the technology, but it's the insights from the data that our clients are wanting richer and more of, and it's got to be interpreted in a way that gives them more information. So and the business intelligence and the dashboards and those kind of things.
Probably turned around in a faster time frame than what you were doing previously.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. And I think customers will become more demanding. And I think that certain aspects of your business, the products that you offer, the services you offer, will become disintermediated, and you'll have to start to offer those for free or for hugely discounted rates in order to attract customers and hold on to customers, while focusing then on the higher value add stuff that you're describing. I think we're all getting used to getting a certain amount of stuff for free now. So if you sign on to a new music service, let's say Spotify, which is all in the news now because they listed this week, the basic service is available for free. So you can listen to music, but as soon as you want to transmit that music into your hi-fi system to play it more broadly, or you want to start accessing playlists and things, now you have to pay a premium service, you have to pay a subscription fee. So I think a lot of app developers now are used to giving something away for free, but then charging a premium for a service on top of that free service. And the money is being made for those, the model's called a freemium model.
I mean, I think it's pretty topical in terms of what's happened with Facebook in the last 2 weeks around. It looks like everything's for free. But they're making their money in an invisible way, which often people aren't privy to. Well, what impact do you think that's going to have?
You are the product. I think what's been good about this Facebook, I suppose, leak of data, or the fact that nobody knew that their data was being used so broadly, or what it was being used for. So I guess as more and more of our lives evolve to being online, dating is happening online. A lot of our social interaction is being conducted online. If you're a keen photographer, you're probably posting photographs into a cloud, and that becomes the product of those businesses. What the Facebook transgression has helped us to do is realize just how valuable what we're creating is, and making us more focused on how we protect it. And I think all of our products, we're using Apple devices, we're using Facebook and other social media, comes with a certain amount of built-in protection. But we don't always know it's there, and we don't always enable that protection. So I think it's forcing us to go back and look at our settings now and say, who has access to the photographs I'm publishing? I mean, one of the settings I have on Facebook is that people can't post things onto my timeline without me approving it first. So I want to have control over what comes onto my timeline. If I was so indiscriminate as to maybe drink too much and fall down, or take off my clothes or something like that, I would like to have access to that photograph and agree whether it goes onto my timeline or not. So I think a lot of people haven't taken the trouble to go and understand what their settings are. I think there's sufficient privacy to protect most of us, but we don't always enable that privacy.
So I think we had this discussion around career choices with the generation that are looking now, and I think your daughter we were chatting about, and certainly there's just such confusion around, well, what do I do? Because the new careers in a way are just not that evident or available. How would you advise someone looking into careers now? What should they choose?
I think also, guidance teachers at schools, university curriculums are not keeping pace necessarily with the changes that are happening. So in the world of big data, we spoke about social media sentiment analysts, or YouTube content creators, or drone pilots, are careers that didn't exist in the past and yet are becoming mainstream careers now. So I think that parents have to do a better job of guiding their youngsters to help them to understand what's available. And I think the fact that the education system might be slow in catching up with the changes is partly compensated for by the fact that so much more is available online now. So if you look at what the Khan Academy have done in taking maths tuition to a very broad audience, and if I was a parent of a young child now, I would definitely get them onto the Khan Academy early and start to monitor their progress through that, and make sure that they're keeping track of what's happening at school alongside. So I don't think, even if we can, privileged enough to be able to afford private school education for our kids, that we can just leave that all in the hands of the educators. I think we have a great responsibility as parents to keep ourselves up to steam with what's happening and the changes that are happening in the market, and make sure that we are feeding that information through to our youngsters. And the kinds of discussion that we've just had with your team around the future of work, we could be having the same discussion on a Saturday morning with all the Omnicor staff who have kids in high school, say, and having those discussions and opening their minds to the possibilities that are out there, as one example of the kind of work that parents can do to assist their children. Because I think if we're not doing that, we're channeling them down a narrow range of possibilities, many of which won't exist in the future.
So Martin, interesting talking about the world of work. One of the systems we have is an automated exit system, which kind of companies use to do a automated exit interview. So we've got thousands of records of people who have left companies with the reasons why they've left. So this kind of gets into the millennial conversation. And I mean, personally, I think the millennial thing is a bit of a myth, because when we looked at that data, we found that most people who are leaving jobs are not disgruntled with the companies they're leaving from. They actually like the company, they like their boss, they like a lot of the things. They're just looking, they've mastered something and they want to move on. And this seems to be a trend that we've discovered in the world of work, that this, and it's not just this generation, there's been a shift in the world where people are looking to keep their jobs exciting, and that their jobs keep offering them something where they can grow. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects to that question. I think there is an element of job hopping amongst the millennials, and I think one has to be very cautious about moving from one job to another before you've created a foundation of skill in the role that you're performing. And what we see happening, sometimes a person moves 2 or 3 times quite quickly. There's an expectation of future employers that there's a base of skill that's been built at each of those levels, and then when there isn't, that person often hits a glass ceiling, or even worse, comes tumbling down. So, I mean, we're very conscious of job hopping, and one of our businesses is a recruitment business, and we see a lot of that, and obviously we discourage that. What is important is to build that foundation of skill, and then grow after that. And I think a lot of companies aren't making enough effort to ensure that there's career pathing for bright, young, ambitious people coming through the ranks. And I think that's often that when people leave a company, it's because they haven't seen the opportunity for the next step within that company. Right. So I think we've got to be a lot more creative. I think because there's so much more opportunity around, we are at risk of losing valuable people in our businesses. So we have to make sure that we're identifying that talent, ensuring that we're creating career paths, and that we're adjusting salaries at a reasonable pace as the person grows their skills. Otherwise, we will have a higher level of turnover and we will lose key skills.
So we had a great session with you earlier, and I did promise some of the team they had questions for you. So this question comes from Crispin, and he's one of our developers. And his question is, so should we be worried or excited about the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a naturally optimistic person, so I always see the changes as exciting. But I think what determines whether we should be fearful or excited is our attitude. If our attitude is, I can get new skills, I can take my tablet after hours and go and study at MIT, because there are courses available that we can take from here and keep my skills up to date, or choose a new path using the underlying skill that I've got. So let's say I'm a developer, perhaps I could take a step into the robotics process world, or I could take a step into the artificial intelligence world, or a big data job. So use the current skills I've got, augment those by studying part-time, either through a training course or by taking it into my own hands and going to go and find an online course, or simply by going home and reading an instruction manual of a new kind of software and going to go and teach myself how to extract data using a SQL database. Mm-hmm. So I think if there's one takeout for the future, I just don't think we can leave our careers in the hands of our employers or the universities or the training providers. I think there's so much technology available to be able to take our careers into our own hands. And some of that is paid for, but a lot of it is free. So, I can go and study many of these courses at Harvard and MIT and Stanford just by looking at the free courses that they offer and what's available. Apple University is an online treasure trove of information that's available to people that want to acquire new skills. So I really think that people's attitude and their willingness to put in extra hours and they're taking the initiative to do those kinds of things will determine whether we should be scared or excited about the opportunities going forward.
But in a way, what you're saying is, if you're in a job right now, don't get too comfortable. You can enjoy your job, and your employer maybe has some responsibility for creating a career path where you can grow and stretch and be redeployed and learn new things. But you have an equal responsibility to change the way you're skilled, so that you can offer them something different. Is that...
And I think there is also a trend of people not having careers in a corporate for their entire... I spoke at a graduation yesterday for some interns who just completed a program at our academy. And I said, look, I really feel embarrassed saying this in front of the person who's just spent all this money, sourcing, finding you, training you, and giving you a year's worth of experience, that you're not going to finish your careers at this organization. A lot of people will change organizations a few times during their career, but many more will actually become self-employed. So as an entrepreneur, you will now offer services to multiple corporates. And in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you're going to have to manage your brand. You're going to have to get evaluated at the end of each of those tasks, and people are going to decide whether they got value for their money. You're going to have to keep your skills up to date. Because if I don't know, maybe you're great at programming in a language that becomes obsolete, that's going to be of no use. No one's going to employ you going forward. Right. You're going to have to know which portals to offer your services on, because you have to be seen. You have to charge a rate which is market related. So all the things that your company is currently handling, your finance department is determining the rates, and your marketing department is getting the company's name out there, and your HR department is worrying about your career goals. You have to take all of that stuff into your own hands and manage your career yourself if you're self-employed. And a lot of people choose to be self-employed these days and are managing their careers successfully as we speak. And I think we'll see more of that.
So that speaks to the idea of Fiverr, I guess. Do you know the website Fiverr, where you can offer your skills and people can kind of bargain you? You don't have to employ a marketing person. You can just go and put it on there.
And there are dozens of portals that do exactly that. So TaskRabbit is one where many, in the US market, there's tools where analytical people can offer, so different portals for different kinds of skills.
And do homework, apparently.
And have outsource your homework. And
I wonder as a parent, we're talking a little bit about the kind of redundancy in formal education.
Yeah.
And as a parent, I'm kind of stuck a little bit in the model of, my kids have got to go to university and get a degree, and they've got to do that kind of thing. But we're hearing at the same time about the kind of leap of faith that you can take and just educate yourself, get into the gig economy, and just offer a service that is valuable, and then you'll find employment that way. How do you balance those kind of things? What do you, how do you talk to someone who's a school leaver now and give them advice about which of those paths makes more sense?
And before I answer your question, I think we're selling our services into corporates who sometimes are old-fashioned in their approach. So they'll say, I need a chartered accountant to do this job. When actually, we know that a BCom could do that job quite happily, and sometimes that's to do with the ego of the person that person's going to work for them. By having chartered accountants working for him, he can then justify a higher position. So I think that's something we have to look at. But at the end of the day, I think organizations need to stay competitive. And to be competitive, they're not going to be able to have lots of people that are overqualified for jobs, but I also think it's hard to retain people in jobs if they're overqualified. So if a chartered accountant has been put into a job that a BCom person is going to be should be doing, quite quickly that person is going to become bored and going to feel like they haven't used all of the skills that they're trained for. I think my advice to a young person coming into the market would be, how can you develop and hone skills that are valuable to employers going forward? So if I think of the role of, let's say, a business analyst, in the past it was all about writing a functional spec and being able to elicit requirements from a group of people, maybe a diverse group of people within a corporation. But more and more we're expecting the business analyst to understand the user interface, the UX component of it, to understand the data and what data is being created by the app or the service or the product that's being offered, and then how that data be used later from a big data perspective. The business owners must be able to do basic testing. They have to understand the impact of things, technologies like artificial intelligence. Should there be artificial intelligence incorporated into that product? So a business analyst is not what a business analyst was going forward. So what are the skills that I need to bring to the party and that I need to learn? So I've got friends with kids at primary school now, where the dad's going with the daughter on a weekend to go and help the daughter to program robots. So that's what's happening in primary schools today. And I think that's very forward thinking of those schools to be introducing those kinds of programs, because clearly one way of avoiding redundancy is to be a robot trainer. So rather than sitting complaining about robots taking our jobs, become a trainer of robots and make sure that you have a valuable role to play in that process. Of course, in time, robots will train themselves, but for the foreseeable future, they need to be trained by human beings.
And certainly offering coding in primary school rather than cursive writing. Yeah, and learning to code, I think there's a number of skills. You could be logical, you could have attention to detail. There's a sort of a problem solve. You have to solve problems when your code doesn't work, and I think it's a fantastic way of getting basic skills that are valuable, even if you didn't become a programmer, to young people, and those skills will I think be very valuable for them, regardless of their career choice.
So Martin, I have a question from Amelia, who's our industrial psychology intern, and she was saying in the South African context, a lot of what we're talking about now with sort of the basic universal income maybe could happen. Elon Musk talks about, well, there's going to be redundancy of jobs, and eventually we're just going to have to give everybody a salary every month. People can do more meaningful things. You've spoken about you can go study more. But how realistic is that in our economy and with our already unemployment rate sitting so high?
If we don't fix this problem of unemployment, I think this is going to be a terrible country to live in going forward. And it's really encouraging for me to see the efforts that government is making. Last week Cyril Ramaphosa launched the Yes Initiative with big business, and he's cajoling big business into taking a percentage of their profits and employing people that aren't currently employed. So the target is over the next 3 years to employ 1 million people that aren't currently employed. And what's going to be required? You're going to source those people, you have to assess them, you have to train them and give them skills, and then give them work experience for a year. What we found is that once people have been employed for a year, they tend to stay employed. They don't become unemployed again. So just by taking 1 million people and getting them into the job market, creating opportunities. But I also think business are happier to invest in these kinds of initiatives if government is governing well. So if there's stability, if there's growth, if there's policy certainty, and I think for a long period of time in this country we haven't had that. So businesses have been reluctant to employ. Right now there's this optimism, hopefully not false optimism, and we certainly seeing in our recruitment businesses, in our training academy, a change of heart, where companies are now prepared to invest in people. So I think government need to be involved in the process. They need to create that stability. Big business needs to follow up and make sure that those people are, that there is opportunity and that those people are being deployed.
But do you think this idea of just giving everybody a universal salary every month will work?
What I don't think will miraculously create jobs is lowering the pass levels, matric pass levels. I don't think free tertiary education is going to suddenly create a whole lot of jobs that don't exist today. So I really think we've got to augment. I think McKinsey did some research and said that worldwide about 60% of people coming out of tertiary education aren't ready to work. So they haven't been given the right skills. And so schools and universities are reacting too slowly to changes. So I think that organizations like the Mindworx Academy, who are taking people with degrees, retraining them, give them additional skills, give them practical skills, give them case studies to work through, so that when they land in the workplace, they're actually productive immediately, is going to be the way forward. I think corporations are going to have to invest heavily in training and development. I think people are going to have to take matters into their own hands, students, junior workers, and I think we're all going to have to make sure that we're training for the right jobs going forward.
Okay, so I mean, Martin, we've spoken a lot about the kind of the transitions with people coming into the workplace. I'm interested in the leadership component of it. I mean, how do we lead this new generation of people? What do they expect from leaders now that is different maybe from before?
I think that that sort of command and control style of leadership now is a thing of the past. I think the model of servant leadership, where you're listening, where you're taking into account needs. I think we've got to be conscious of the fact that young people have, very high expectations of being promoted quickly and earning lots of money really quickly. And so we're going to have to manage that millennial expectation. But by the same token, I think we have to do things differently, and we have to, allow people that are showing promise to take on more responsibilities at an earlier age. Not just, I think not managing in such a hierarchical fashion like we did before. I think being open-minded as to using contract staff rather than only permanent staff. I think a big chunk of being successful in the future is going to be about being able to scale up really quickly and scale down really quickly. You lose a major client. How do you scale down? You're going to have to retrench or retrain or go off and look for a new client to fill that gap. So I think that fluidity and that scaling up, scaling down requires a very different attitude towards employment, and it's almost inevitable that some of the employment is going to be contract or temporary type work. And I think the benefit that we've all achieved with this, using services like Uber and Airbnbs, at the end of each transaction, we're rating the driver's rating us. We're rating the Airbnb host, the Airbnb host is rating us. And I think that's going to filter through into employment also.
That kind of instant feedback.
So the millennials love instant gratification. They love getting instant feedback. So at the end of each project assignment, giving them feedback as to how they performed. Telling them what steps they need to take to improve their performance, and then redeploying them onto another project. Measuring them, say, did they actually improve? Did that thing get better or worse?
Sounds like a Black Mirror episode.
No one's going to take an Uber driver that's got a 3 rating. In fact, Uber won't continue to employ that driver. He'll be gone. So if you go and we can go check our own ratings on Uber. If you're a teenager and you're getting drunk and you're getting sick in the Uber, your rating's going to be really low, and eventually the Uber driver's not going to collect you any longer.
And in a way, it kind of accelerates the whole performance management component. Is like instant feedback. If you're a 3, you shouldn't be working here.
And that thing of a chunky performance review once a year, I think,
completely
is the past.
Redundant.
Much smaller chunks and much more regularly is going to be the way forward.
One last question from the team, and that's from Bruce. And you spoke about the science lag and the maths lag. Are those subjects going to be compulsory in all careers? How do you see the STEM subjects playing out in the future?
I think they're such an important component of a whole bunch of where jobs are going. So there's very few jobs. Like previously, if you took a marketing job, for example, there wasn't a high degree of analytics involved. Whereas now, as marketing's moved into the social media space and the digital space, there's so much information coming out from who's looking at ads, who's buying, who's clicking through. What's the sentiment towards a product on social media? Is it positive or is it negative? I just think that people going to marketing, they have to be highly analytical. We spoke about the business analyst role and how that's evolving. You can't not have a data component to a business analyst job. We looked at how many customer service jobs are having robots added. So where you're selling a product and you have to go through a certain number of questions, it's not inconceivable that in the future a robot will be listening in on the conversation and prompting you to ask the question that you haven't asked yet. So we're going to have to coexist with technology no matter what job we do. Whether you're a farmer, a customer service agent, whether you're working in McDonald's, on the counter, there's going to be an aspect of technology to your job. So if you don't have maths, if you don't have science, if you haven't been down a path of subjects that require logic, I think it's going to be very hard to find work going forward. So it's something we simply have to fix. We've got to get that right.
I mean, it seems as if the resources of the future and the kind of STEM subjects and lend themselves to the kind of big data analytics and the development of AI technology and those kind of things. But there's another component to it as well, because we don't only want to interface with machines. In other words, if you go to a hospital, they could have like the best machines available and you could be diagnosed brilliantly, but you want to have a conversation with someone who's got empathy, who can give you a bit of hope, who can tell you a story. And it seems like the human skills that combine with technology, those human skills of understanding how people function, understanding their fears, understanding where they're vulnerable, are going to become increasingly foregrounded in the future as well.
And certainly, if you look at the skills that are going to be valuable in the future, it's about complex problem solving. It's about empathy. It's about collaboration, working in teams and groups of people. It's about resilience and finishing what you start, and kind of when problems inevitably come along, how do you deal with those problems? And I think these are skills that are highly valuable, but also very difficult for machines to replicate. And I think focusing on those skills for our youth, but also for our staff in our businesses. I mean, how many people have been on an empathy course or an EQ course?
Exactly.
Or
can you teach empathy?
And I think you can. I think you can. I think just situational awareness, or maybe giving people feedback as to when they haven't been empathetic, or just having that feedback loop can improve levels of empathy. So I think these are things we have to watch in the workplace and definitely grow and develop.
It's a little bit like leadership, this idea of that you can train anybody about what are the effective components of leadership behaviors. And you could train people about what are the effective behaviors about empathic behaviors or those kind of things.
And also you can then assess, because you can bring in the smartest person into your team and they can wreak havoc with your team if they're not empathetic, or if they haven't got those social nuancing skills.
And I think there are great tools available now for measuring emotional intelligence. It doesn't, and certainly a lot of companies are assessing emotional intelligence prior to employing people these days, because if if there's a certain culture in an organization and somebody comes in with a very low EQ, there's potential to disrupt that culture. And I think the companies that have done that job well, you can actually feel that culture when you walk into that organization. And certainly people that are let go, fired from those organizations, or worked out of those organizations, often it's not because of the delivery, on-the-job delivery, or their technical skills. It's because they haven't fitted into it from a culture perspective. Or they have a very low EQ and a much higher EQ is required to do that job.
Okay.
Just a sort of a random question. I know you're an avid book reader. What are you currently reading at the moment?
Well, I've actually just finished a book about the San Bushman called Affluence Without Abundance. Which for me was a fascinating read about, I think we have so much around us, and how much of what we've got around us do we actually need? How can we reduce clutter, and how can we live more basic lives, and maybe share more of what we've got? And then I also just read the new CEO of Microsoft, read a book called Hit Reset, about the transition of that organization who, frankly, Microsoft have been through quite a tough time. They've missed out on the mobile market. They've put a big emphasis on cloud computing now, but they're nowhere close to where Amazon is in that space. Google leads in many respects in search. So that was an interesting business book about how an incoming CEO into an organization can actually reset the culture and drive the organization in a very different direction. And I, having read that book, think that perhaps his leadership skills were required 5 or 10 years ago rather than, and I think he'll make great changes, but that organization could have benefited from that change earlier.
I mean, I'm not sure, you mentioned earlier the Laszlo Block book on, he was head of...
Rules,
and so I haven't read the book, but I was reading something about the book, and they were telling a story around how in recruitment, at Google, the people who do the interview are not the people who make the decision about who they should recruit, because they create some kind of emotional investment with the person, and that's just noise, and the other people make it. You read the book?
I did, and I think what was fascinating for me is how much of Google's technology is being used in HR, so they're really eating their own dog food. I mean, they probably get more CVs sent to them than the most corporations on earth, and they're actually feeding that all those CVs into their artificial intelligence engines, their machine learning engines, and they're using the information that's coming out of those CVs to better predict future performance. So they really are doing a fantastic job of measuring and managing performance, bringing the right skills into that organization, moving the organization as it evolves over time. HR offering valuable services to the organization rather than being a crutch or an impediment to an organization growing. So it really is, from what I've read, I really think it is the epitome of how an HR function should work and how to use data effectively in an HR role. It's a great read, and I would encourage anybody that's a CEO of a company that has people in it or an HR person to read that book. It's a super read.
I mean, any gems from there that you can recall that you'd be willing to share?
I just think that we have access to so much information as we run our businesses, and we underuse that information. If I think of our recruitment businesses, we've got so many. We know what people earn, we know what skills they have, we know how recently they've kept those skills up to date, what courses they've done, so we can spot trends, we can spot salary information. And I think so much of that information doesn't get used, or if we have it, we don't package it well and reuse it and offer it as services to our clients. So I think my big takeout from work rules was just that we have access to lots of information, and we need to be less subjective and be more objective and use that information wisely in our businesses.
And just this broadening of thinking and not being so have the blinkers on the whole time in the way. And you certainly do that. I mean, the talk this morning kind of just shakes your reality, because you're so stuck in the present. You don't actually stop and think about where's the business going and what are the skills you need to build.
But I also think that the technologies that have crept into our lives have done so over a period of time, and we almost haven't realized that they're there. So I gave the example of where I could have done a better job getting to my destination yesterday if I'd used artificial intelligence in the form of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the form of Google Maps, because it would have taken me to the right place. It would have told me what traffic there was along the way. It would have suggested alternative routes if there was traffic. So that's one example of where a human being's brain, augmented with a machine learning, can do a better job. And so I think rather than being fearful of machines and robots, what we should be thinking about is how can we do a better job in our lives, in our personal lives, by using maybe digital personal assistants, or in our work lives using the power that our office products have to do things more efficiently, to get rid of spam emails, to answer automatically certain emails that we don't have to pay a lot of attention to, and then just in our work lives to augment our intelligence with machine intelligence and become more efficient in what we do.
I mean, it's quite interesting. My son's 22, and whatever internet generation, he won't go on a trip without consulting his phone first and seeing what the traffic conditions are like. I mean, for him, that's like a completely natural, obvious thing to do. Whereas, I was brought up in a different world, and it's like, I've got to make an effort and think of it and decide to do it in a completely different way. And like we were talking earlier about this idea of hot desking, and how the corporations of the future that you are just structured very differently. People work from home and all those kind of things. But we've seen like the human effect of that in some kind of ways that people still like a territory. So we have officially a hot desking policy. You can sit anywhere. There's no hierarchy. You just take whatever you want. But people like to claim a space and put their things up and hang their family photos and do all that kind of thing. And we've seen very little kind of the hot desking mentality. And I wonder if there's like human blockages to these ideas, which sound very forward thinking, but in reality don't translate in the kind of way that we may expect.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been so many papers written about whether we have actually seen the benefits of work from home and hot desking, and I think that the culture of an organization to a large extent determines whether the things do happen. And quite often you have to make quite big changes and ban certain things, or I remember when I was working at Nedbank in the early 90s, everybody had an office. It was, and then I was one of the first departments to move into an open plan environment. And quite quickly, the noise became an issue.
Right.
The constant interruptions became an issue. And I implemented a policy of, we had a sort of a block of wood which had a red side and a green side. If the red side was up, it meant that you were concentrating on a piece of work and you needed to finish the work, and then you couldn't be approached. In order to get, and if it was on green, then you were open for collaboration.
Right.
So I think you've got to make some bold moves, but then you've also got to find ways of helping people to become productive. I find I work best if I've got a chunk of work that has to be done, I can't do that at the office. There's just way too many interruptions. So I'll start my day at home, work in my study where there's no interruptions, get that piece of work done, and then come to the office. And I realize that the time that I spent in the office, I need to be available for collaboration. People see me there, they want to ask me questions, they want to bounce ideas off me. I try to take as many meetings as I can in open spaces where people can walk past and hear what's going on and see what's going on, because most of the meetings I have aren't confidential, don't involve salary information or sensitive topics. So then make those meetings in public spaces where you're seen. But there's also not an expectation that I'll be there from 8 until 5.
Right.
I need to be out seeing clients.
Yes.
I need to do blocks of work. So I think one can culturally change an organization to, and some of the changes will just evolve over periods of time.
I think it's fascinating because I know when we moved into open plan, I think somebody commented on our talent engagement survey that they think it's very wrong that Hilton doesn't have an office.
Yeah.
And now when I journey into companies and I see sort of people sitting in these massive offices, it just seems so strange.
Old-fashioned, yeah.
Yeah, so it's all about change and that ability and the agility of being able to move and change and deal with some of the discomfort. But I personally think at Omnicor there have been mostly benefits from the open space. And
I agree. I think it also, it's meant to send a message, and the message is that you can have a language of power in a corporation where, the bigger your office and the bigger your chair, and it suggests that you're special in some kind of way. And if you want to send a message that we're all equal, everyone here's got a voice, we all want everybody to contribute, then you want everyone to have a kind of equal work area where it sends a different message, and
but
that's
also,
what we
if
try.
If you think about the conversations that you're overhearing where you're sitting, if you had been in a big office far away from all of that, how much more interaction would you have to schedule? How many more meetings would you have to schedule? How many more emails would you have to read to stay abreast of what's going on in the organization? Whereas now you've got a heart, you can feel that heartbeat, you can hear what's going on, you can quickly interrupt.
Yes.
You go to a meeting, you've heard things that are happening, so that you're more intelligent.
Right.
So I think we're just much more in touch being in open plan or having some of our meetings in open plan because we know what's happening in the organization. We're not cut off from it.
Yes.
And I think the speed that organizations are having to change to stay relevant these days, I don't see how you can do it if you cut off from reality like that. I do think you do need time where you can think and where you can.
Yeah.
And where that means that once every 6 months you've got to take a week off and go and sit on a beach somewhere with a whole lot of books that a whole lot of reading or a whole lot of case studies or whether you stay at home for a few hours a day and if you've got a private space there. But I do think that open plan kind of being accessible to people for a certain number of hours a day is just a must. Yeah,
we were quite conscious when we built our environment that people do sometimes need to concentrate, and we create little breakaway rooms.
Yeah.
Almost like the size of a phone booth, where you could just go in there and sit down and concentrate. And that was the equivalent of your block of wood saying, I'm concentrating now, leave me alone.
Yeah. Or small spaces like the one we're in now where 3 people or 4 people can collaborate on an idea and then go back to their open planning at the time.
Yeah.
So Martin, I think that's a good place to stop. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. And thank you so much. The impression that one gets of you is just this sense of energy, enthusiasm, but also kind of, you can see you've got your life well balanced and you're living your values, and it's such an honor to chat and learn from you. And thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great. It's been so stimulating. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. It feels like we've in a way just started the conversation, so maybe we'll invite you back for episode 2. It'll be brilliant.
I value that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So to be successful in the next decade, we will need to demonstrate foresight in navigating the rapidly shifting shape of our organizations, and certainly the skill requirements. How ready are you? Has your organization seen into the future? Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it. You can find our other episodes on iTunes or go straight to our website, www.omnicor.co.za.